That is the master data management. Will be presented by Mr. Fayyaz the CEO of Cinergie. So the master data we use everywhere in our daily life. We have the 3 or 4 cycles. It's procure to pay, or it's order to cash, or it's hire to retire. So there are different type of the master data: employee master, vendor master, customer master. So such type of. So for that purpose, I would like to call Sir Fayyaz onto the stage to put a spotlight onto the master data management, its modeling, governance, and all the things. So, sir, please come. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So, a bit about myself and Cinergie Digital, and a bit about where we are. Hold on. This should work. The slides are working? Thank you. All right, let's start. So just to set the scene in terms of where we are in the world that we live in, what you are seeing is the amount of data is growing much faster than it used to. The variety of the data and the speed with it's being generated is growing. On top of that, you've got new digital platforms coming in, artificial intelligence, cloud. These result in a lot of disruptions in the business. So every enterprise needs to think, how is it going to manage the data and use it appropriately? And many times, as we said, it's not the availability of data that's an issue. It is making sense of that data that is a challenge. Now, we as a company provide enabling technologies for this. So we work with various partners, and it's really around enabling technologies to manage the data. But before we get into the technology aspect, let's forget technology for a minute and talk about if we talk about data strategy and data management, what are the things that need to happen? As an organization, when we talk about data-driven organization, everybody says, yes, it is common sense that you need to be there, but in a way, from an organizational capability perspective, the company needs to first you have to start with the data operations side, in fact. Then you get into the data management, how do you manage it properly? And then when we talk about governance, there is various elements of governance that needs to be done, and that leads to data organization. Specifically, when we talk about organizational capabilities, and I'm not talking about just technologies, we have to assess, do we really have access to the data, which is the real-time access of the data? Then, how do you bring the data into a coherent place, because the data is coming out in variety of areas, how do you bring it together? Then, some of the other capabilities that the companies would need to generate is, do you really have an enterprise level data catalog which you can determine? Do you understand where your data is, which is where you've got your metadata management, and then comes the master data management. Now, master data management is the specific for this session, but it fits within the overall. And then how are you governing the data? We've talked about data governance, abhi baat hui thi kafi uske bare mein. But other than data governance, some very real issues in many organizations is managing the data quality. So do you have the capabilities to manage data quality? Do you have the right enterprise architecture? Because technology ultimately does come into play. And finally, at the end of the day, all of this has to be driven by business strategy perspective and business perspective. Okay, agar hame operational excellence, which is efficiency, agar improve karni hai, what kind of data do you need to do that? If you need to improve the customer intimacy, getting better understanding the customers, what kind of data you need that? And if you want to reinvent yourself and do new things, what kind of data you need to do that? So in a way, this is one way of encapsulating. If you've talked about, if you have to establish an enterprise level data strategy and management, this is, and just by the way of an example, This is something that we have been using in Emirates. I have been in executive positions in Emirates the last few years before forming Cinergie Digital. And again, it's a very large enterprise, $25 billion business, 100,000 people, 50 odd business units, but we have used similar models for multi-billion dollar business like Emirates Airline, as well as smaller enterprises like hotels or catering shops. So that hopefully sets the scene in terms of what as an organization, various dimensions and elements that go into the data strategy. Now let's dig into what do we mean by master data management and why is that perhaps important. In a way, if we talk about any business, just like humans have a DNA which drives everything, businesses have a DNA, and that is the kind of the master data and or the reference data. So the four key things that define a business, and especially in this digital world, is what is your core master data, which is your parties, products, suppliers, and locations. Where is your reference data, which is geographies, entities, metadata, definition of your data, and the algorithms and use cases at a high level. Now, this becomes challenging when you work in large enterprises. In large enterprises, for example, we talked about banks here. What happens is they start with putting systems in their silos or in their verticals, which create a variety of segments in which similar data is stored. How do you make sure that all of this data is coherent across all of these systems? Because if they are not coherent, then you try to put all of the data together, it results in inconsistencies and quality issues. So that's where MDM as a solution comes into play, which is for the reference data, you create a single source of truth, which hopefully enables you to make better, faster decisions, reduce costs, and enables governance. So use cases, and now I'm talking about an enabling technology. Yeah, what an MDM solution enables the companies to do is a unified view, yeah, of master data. Now they are then subsequently used across three fundamental use cases. One is your core operational systems to make sure that they get consistent information across all of the systems. Analytics, and again, because when you're trying to do enterprise, if you're doing a department in analytics, maybe the department's ERP system or CRM system could do it. But if you have to bring data from ERP, CRM, IoT, OT systems together, you need to have base data corrected first, and then you can do the analysis. And also from a compliance perspective. So yes, we don't have GDPR in the country, but GDPR-like initiatives, or from a corporate responsibility perspective, companies need to do that. And hence, an MDM enables these kind of areas to make sure you get consistent information. MDM as a solution can be implemented in a variety of ways. So the one way is you've got an MDM solution, you author your data there, and then it goes into your ERP systems and web systems to ensure consistency. In the other scenario, it could be that the data is sitting in their old systems, but you're creating an index of that, or you are centralizing that. But then in some cases, it could be a coexistence where basically you make sure that some of the data is in the MDM solutions, some of the other rest of the data is in the other areas. But at the end of the day, irrespective of the implementations, the goal is still to make sure that your critical data, which is your reference data, your master data, is coherent across verticals, across business units, and across systems in these business units. At the end of the day, this is an enabling technology, but this is the enabling technology that needs to bring in the business users who are really the owners of the data together, the data stewards who really are the managing the data, core data, and then of course there is the integration piece and the developers and analysts who need to work on that. So whatever an MDM solution has to cater for all of these categories of people. Overall, these are the kind of capabilities that should be there in an MDM solution. How do you model data? How do you validate data? Merging and matching across variety of systems, managing the life cycle of that, managing hierarchies could in itself be, and queries. So going forward, I'll just, without getting into too much details, just throw a few of these things, because data modeling is important, because that's ultimately, and this is an enterprise data model of your entire landscape across verticals, across business units. How do you create a data model for your organization? That's one capability that is important. The other is, how do you ensure that you've got the right quality? So basically, and do you have the right APIs to bring in the right data and do the proper validations across those data? And this is all about master data across everything in your enterprise. Matching, because what sometimes happens is similar data is sitting in variety of systems. So sometimes you have to match and merge the data together. Life cycle, basically, sometimes you may have variety of versions of the same data across data models. And because even reference data has a life cycle, so it could be a time-dependent reference data. How do you make sure that you bring them in together? Hierarchies. Hierarchies are extremely difficult in many large organizations. For example, even if you were to define a supplier or a customer, and in a large enterprise context, somebody could be both a supplier and a customer, and they may have multiple business units operating. So you have to make sure that you can define all those kind of complex relations between master data. If you've done all of this, especially for business users, it is important to create 360 views of this data. So you should be able to view all of the reference data graphically with all of the specific relations and bring it to variety of people to collaborate in doing this. Lineage, data lineage is another very important thing, because if you've got a master data, what they call a golden record or a master data, it is not just important, and this is where compliance perspective this becomes important, is where does this data come from? Does this come from ERP system of business unit A, or this, because it could be the same, and sometimes the golden record could be made up of multiple elements coming from multiple systems. So how do you consolidate that and track it back to the source systems is another capability. And finally, to support the data governance, do you have the right workflow models which are based upon the governance models? Because that's where you see there are data analysts, data stewards, and the business needs to come together to make sure that they can all trust each other. They've got the right authorities to making sure that the right people are changing things and approving them. Security, again, security and privacy becomes like any other solution is very important, because you are bringing the data from variety of enterprise applications into one common area. How do you make sure? You have to make sure that you've got the right permissions and configurations so that only the right people are accessing the data and manipulating the data. Finally, any solution that you bring in today, especially a solution like an enterprise MDM solution, which is expected to talk to almost all systems across all of your industry verticals and business units, integration becomes very important. You should have all the kinds of capabilities. whatever is supported by the source system should be supported by you for a two-way integration between the system. So hopefully this gave you a bit of understanding of, from a data strategy perspective, what are the key things that any organization should be looking into, and a bit of a speak into how an MDM solution enables that part. With that, I would like to thank you all for your time. Thank you. Thank you.